Hello, hi, and welcome again to the Terminal Podcast, where in the end, it's all about the numbers. This is a show about baseball, when in season, but it's not always baseball season. I am your host, and we are broadcasting high above Civic Center Station in downtown Atlanta. And tonight, we are talking to one of the men responsible for a mixture of professional wrestling and Sid special brew back into my life. It's former journalist Ed Molina. Ed, how you doing?
I'm very good, man. It's been a long time. Glad to have you on the show. Very excited. And yeah, man, that's throwbacks to special brews and
Yes,
Monday Night Raws every
yes.
Monday.
When it was the actual Monday Night Wars and everything like that. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
my memories of wrestling are that short brief period and then the classics before that. And so now it's all a different story. There are many things we could talk about that. We could talk about with an established and well accredited former journalist like me and you, of course. But I don't get a chance to talk uh, New York sports with someone who actually is still in New York, right? You're still,
Yes, I am
yeah,
absolutely still in New York. Man, except for the 7 years that I lived in Boston, I lived most of my life in New York. Born and raised in Brooklyn. I spent a lot of my non-journalism career part of my job in the Bronx a lot. I spent a lot of I worked for 6 years for Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. Did a lot of cool stuff there. I worked for Council Member Marjorie Velasquez, also in the Bronx. I did a lot of work with just all over the borough. So I've gotten to know a lot of how the city moves. I think and you hear this a lot in like national radio and national podcasts. People think of New York one way, but this. Every borough moves differently. Staten Island ain't the same as Queens, and it's not the same as Brooklyn and the Bronx is the Bronx. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so Manhattan is Manhattan, and even in Manhattan, Harlem Cats is different than Wall Street Cats. You know what I'm saying? But it's the same borough, and they move differently, different hustle, but it's still hustling, and that's just the vibe of the city.
I'm gonna rearrange the way I had this because it's pretty much leads into one of the questions I had because it's as I've bounced, I've done the exact opposite. Since Boston, I've bounced. I was on the West Coast and I drove all the way back across. I was in the middle of the country. I've been in the South for close to 15, 20 years now. And I know I can't go up north because the snow and the temperature, my skin has become southern to climb. It's like it can't go back. It can't go back. But I don't think, and being around here and seeing all this other stuff, I don't think people truly understand the size of the boroughs that you're talking. That's what it comes down to. When they hear that, they think counties. And like I live in Fulton County, I'm in Atlanta. I'm next to DeKalb County. I'm next to Gwinnett County. I'm next to Cobb County. There's just 1 million people now in Gwinnett. There's a lot of people in each of these counties. There's also a lot of land in between each of these counties, as opposed to the lack of space where everybody's right there on top of you, like it is in New York. So my question is, and it's going to turn to how is this influx? I'll go back to BU when I one of the first things when I left after graduation, two women that would be predominantly the class of women that were at BU that I was friends with, had just moved to New York and were just got there, just trying to get a job, and had a little cute 2 bedroom apartment right across the Brooklyn Bridge. Is that Williamsburg? That's
I
right
believe that's
across.
what it's Williamsburg.
Yeah.
That is correct.
And I can't imagine what that would cost now. I can't imagine just seeing and everything like that. So, how has gentrification, which I've seen everywhere across the country, how has it changed the city that you've seen?
Well, it's funny. I think New York is unique. And what I mean by that is when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I used to be a gatekeeper in the sense of like real New Yorkers, real New Yorkers, real New Yorkers. And as you start running more laps around the sun, you start realizing, change is part of life, evolution is part of life.
Mhm.
A city is living and breathing. I'm sure you've seen a lot of change in Atlanta over the years because of New Yorkers that were moving out. to Atlanta. I know Atlanta was one of the spots that a lot of New Yorkers loved, and because of the
Still
space,
do.
like you said, because especially the space.
Yeah.
New York, in order for us to solve our housing problem, we have to grow upward, skyward. Whereas a place like a city like Houston, a city like Atlanta, even Los Angeles, it can grow out.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things. But the city's always constantly changing, and so when I had that gatekeeper mentality, it was more of a, in hindsight, of a stagnant mentality, not understanding how the city moves. Look, Chinatown's not Chinatown anymore. You know what I mean? It's
Mm.
Chinatown is literally like just a couple of blocks. It used to be more expansive. Little Italy in that part of Manhattan is practically gone. It's only like a couple of blocks where it used to be more expansive. And so even a neighborhood growing up, and I'm from that do the right thing era, as I call it, where there was a lot of tension in New York, a lot of racial tension in New York. You know, there was a point you couldn't go to Bensonhurst if you were Puerto Rican. Hell, you couldn't go to Bensonhurst if you were Irish. It was a very Italian enclave, very protective. Now, if you were to come with me to Bensonhurst, there's a lot of cool Chinese restaurants, authentic Chinese
Really.
restaurants, and there's an actual now Chinatown in Brooklyn that used to be parts of
So
Bensonhurst.
so it's moved. Essentially,
Yeah,
it
and
sounds like
it's
where the
spread.
yeah.
Yes, because you have
Hmm.
Chinatown and Flushing also. Let's not forget there's a large Asian community up in that part of Queens. You as a Met fan, hey man, sometimes a day game, you want to wait it out. Take that 7 train, one stop to Flushing to the Main Street. There's a lot of great dim sum and a lot of great restaurants out there too. And so it goes to that saying that it's constant evolution. Now, where it becomes a problem, gentrification, the difference between someone moving in and being a gentrifier, I think, and just changing the dynamic of the city is when you try to enforce your kind of will or your way of life on the people that are already there. I'll give you an example. We grew up in an era of stoop culture, we called it, right? Hot summer day, we in the stoop, have a little radio, a little boom box, maybe a little crooked eye St. Brew, special brew, whatever, ever. Some of us ain't have AC. This is how we enjoyed the night out. We sat out in our stoops. Um, as people from I don't want to crap on Iowa, but as like people from Iowa and people from Pennsylvania and all these people that want to live their big city dream come into New York. Now you're getting the 311 calls of noise complaints of, the Dominicans downstairs just playing dominoes, not bothering anybody, just listening to their aventura. Now people are complaining about that. And it's like you kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like, yo, those Dominicans have been there for a hot minute. They've been doing this since before you. Um, but again, that's the dynamic of the city. We can go back. You remember a TV show called Fame? I Want to Live Forever. I mean, that's about artistic kids coming to New York City to live their New York dream. And that's the other thing you gotta remember. The good side and the bad side of gentrification is that, a lot of people, they're escaping Atlanta. Maybe they're escaping Fulton County because their LGBTQ way of life is not as accepted as, say, in Chelsea, in Manhattan. You understand what I mean? Um,
Yeah, I'm saying I'm laughing and pausing because they're not leaving here. They're coming here because
yeah,
they're coming from Alabama and Mississippi. Every surrounding state that's basically is they're coming. This is where they're coming, and then or they're trying to go, or they're trying to go to Manhattan. They just haven't gotten that yet, that arm
right,
of it yet. But
right.
this we could go on, but I am
Yeah.
curious because you are mentioning people that are coming from different places when they come to New York and they've been there for a while, not the recent graduates, but the people who've moved there and now been there for a little bit. Do they How has it affected the sportsdom of it? You know what I mean? How is are
Oh,
is how does it affect, like you said, the Bronx is changed and stuff like that? It's obviously still Yankee fans, but how has it kind of changed the way people view sports in New York City, in Manhattan and such?
well, I think, for example, I think where it changed. I think a great example is the Bronx. I used to hang out. I think it's the Bronx Ale House. There's a Yankee Tavern near there. There's the two bars near there. And what you'll see is that, for example, when Houston's in town, there's a lot of people that grew up in Houston and you'll go to the tavern to go have a drink before the game, and you'll see people with your Biggio jerseys and with the old school stripe, Nolan Ryan jerseys, and with your Altuve jerseys. And so it changed in a lot of ways. It changes the dynamic of the people that attend the game, because for them, when the Astros come home, or say you're a Golden State Warrior fan, because that's another hot ticket, whether you're in MSG or in going to the Barclays in Brooklyn, it fills up with opposing teams, like fans of the opposing teams. And so
Understood.
yeah, and so like this is their chance for a lot of these quote unquote outsiders to get a piece of home. Like if you're a Spurs fan, you want to rock out your Wemby jersey at the Barclays, or when when he makes his debut at MSG. And so in that sense, I think it's good for business, because at the end of the day, the sports owners, they're of the philosophy from The Wire, money don't know owners, money only knows spenders. So they don't care if that money's coming from a Yankee fan or an Astro fan or a Padres fan, or you know what I mean, or a White
I hear
Sox
you.
fan.
Well,
And so in that sense, the dynamic has changed. Where sometimes, man, there's been games where it's like, I swear, in MSG of all places, it'll be a Curry crowd. It'll be Knicks fans, and Knicks fans are very vocal and passionate, but it'll be a
yes,
Curry crowd.
that's okay. Well, but see, I would argue, and as a non-Knicks fan, because I would say that's the one team that I felt the entire city from Manhattan to Nassau, everybody was a Knicks fan. You know what I mean? Like they're all rooted for the Knicks. That was the one part of the city. So it seems like it, because now they're back being national, because they're now actually really good, that they do kind of have the heartbeat of the city. But everybody would let a player, because Jordan would come in there and people would, it's a Jordan, Jordan could, no, he wouldn't steal the crowd, but yeah, I mean, but there are other players that could come in there and do that at all times. I feel like,
I No,
but
well, it's funny you said that. Jordan's, I think, is a great example. I mean, yes, people would come to the Garden to see Jordan, but I think the difference is that, and Jordan used to talk about this a lot. He loved road games better than home games. The reason he loved road games is because he loved the silence of a place, of an arena. He loved the silence. He loved shutting them up. And particularly, he talked about this with MSG. When you shut up 14, what is his capacity, about 14,000 faithful,
yeah,
that is such a rush to silence 14,000 people confined in the same building. You know what I mean? Like, I
yeah,
think that's a bigger rush than the cheer of the crowd of the United Center, to be frank. And so nowadays, what you'll have, and the other dynamic that's changed, is that now, um sports is so consumable, it's so, I'm sorry, available to us. So like if you're a Curry fan, you don't necessarily have to be a Golden State Warrior fan. But if when we were growing up, we just watched the Knicks, maybe the Nets, because that's all that was allowed and presented to us on local TV, and like whether it was MSG, whether it was Channel 9, whether it's Channel 11. Same thing with baseball. It's like we only watch the Mets and Yankees because of these rules. Now, someone like my friend's son, he's a diehard Curry fan. There's digital technology now for him to watch all. He could ignore the Knicks completely and just watch all 82 games of Steph Curry. And so, like, you have that dynamic too. Like, you're 100%. But the thing is, now you have people openly cheering for Steph Curry, whether they're a Curry fan or they're a Golden State Warrior fan. It's more, and in that sense, you can be the toxic dynamic of, like, say, the bleacher creatures. The bleacher creatures in the Bronx. I remember once sitting in old Yankee Stadium. This guy was wearing a Blue Jays jersey. A Yankee fan poured a drink over him. Of course, fist fight breaks out. Cop escorts the Blue Jay fan out of the building. You're seeing less and less of that toxic attitude nowadays. I'm sure there's troglodytes that would love to bring it back to that era. I personally don't want to go to the stadium to see fist fights break out. That's just me. But there's now that level of comfort where a Curry fan can be a Curry fan and not have those kind of problems, compared to, like, say, back in the day.
well, you talk about being specific fans, specific players. It puzzles me that everybody suddenly realizes that Jalen Brunson's really good. Um, it he was a national player of the year, and was the heart of that Villanova team, which is now his teammates, that won a national title. Just because he didn't get picked high in the draft means that doesn't diminish the abilities that he had, that he then showed off in Dallas and now is showing off in New York. So how is he taking? I mean, I've seen him. I've seen the Garden get behind him. I've seen it, kind of like I saw the other day. What was it when it was the one national game that he they won it and everybody stayed to cheer him afterwards. It's like Steve went to the interview afterwards after the win and they all stuck around and to cheer for him and everything. That doesn't happen for just anybody. So is he really taking over the city? Is it really,
Oh, absolutely.
Jalen Brunson?
Absolutely. No, Jalen Brunson is him in this town. I think the two most popular probably athletes in New York City as far as like the local teams is Aaron Judd and Brunson. I was gonna say Rick Brunson, which is his father. Jalen Brunson. He's become as beloved as a Mello, maybe even more, which that was a complicated relationship. He is seen as a Larry Johnson. He is seen as a Pat Ewing. We'll see what happens in the playoff if he becomes a Charles Smith. I don't mean to joke, but but like I think to your point about why he was overlooked when he was in Dallas. I mean, he was kind of overshadowed by Luka. Luka is such a generational talent. I mean, this guy's been winning chips in Europe since he was what, 15,
If that,
16?
yeah, I was gonna say younger
And
than that.
yeah, and so he comes already seasoned playing against grown men, not just playing against grown men, but playing Euro basketball against some, there's some good talent out in France, like when you got Gobert and all these international competitions, and it, it's just he comes from a more the way they do things in Europe is more based on a soccer model than it is here, where here you got to go to the AAUs and you got to go to the right high school and then college. And I think the college game is diminished. Like people do not look at the college game the way we did when we were growing up. Um, if you're not a one and done kid, you're the thinking becomes among the pundits, well, what's wrong with him? I don't remember if Jalen Brunson was a one and done kid. I don't think he
No,
was. You can probably
you think I want to say he went 3, if not 4 years. He was, that Nova team that won. That's basically the second circuit. I don't know if Hart and or DiVincenzo are. I thought they were coming off the bench, but they should be coming off the bench. But either
but
way,
you
like that, it was the three of them, and they had a big man, and yeah, no, they. I want to say Nova probably lost a game maybe that year. This is when I was still paying attention to college basketball. So, but you're right. This
and
the
you hit the nail on the head when you were paying attention to college basketball. And
Yeah.
I actually think one and done ruined college basketball in a lot of ways because it's like he didn't give you a chance. When we were coming up and the Big East mattered and all and the Final Four was such. I think growing up in this part of the East Coast, it was such a big deal because of Georgetown, because of St. John's, because they're no longer that landscape. Now it's like look at what is it? LaMelo. I get LaMelo, I believe. Not LiAngelo, he's the scrub. LaMelo, he went out to New Zealand to play in their pro league against grown men instead of he dropped out of high school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
went to go play against grown men. So he took more of a European approach. And maybe the New Zealand league isn't as tough as Euro basketball, but it's still unless he was going to Duke or like one of those like high end programs, he was getting better experience. Even if it was quote unquote scrub pros, he's getting better experience playing against grown men than he
That
is
are
playing against 18 to 21-year-olds that are probably his contemporaries in AAU that he's already been bowling against in AAU with a lot of these travel teams or a lot of these high school teams that travel. I think
grown men who
opening up
are playing for their lives, who are playing for their dinner at the moment. They're going to be playing as hard as possible because once again, this is my paycheck. So yeah, I'm not going to let some 18-year-old kid. Yeah, no.
some
Yeah, you're right.
16-year-old kid. I'm not gonna let
16.
some 16-year-old kid take food from my table or pay my lights. Like I just can't, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's a different mentality. So and I think that's because there's more options, much like in global soccer. And that's part of the globalization, I think, of the NBA, is it's a byproduct of this. Now maybe going to the NCAA doesn't have the luster. And again, the other thing is the perception is like, well, which I think it's great when a kid stays 3, 4 years, like happened with that Nova team. And in a lot of ways, they're an anomaly in this modern era of sports because they stayed together for so long. You develop a cohesiveness of teamwork, chemistry, you know, and with Jay Wright, to credit to his program, he does coach. I think a lot of these kids that are one and done are from people smarter than me have told me this. They're fundamentally flawed because these AAUs aren't worried about teaching technique. They're worried about winning games. Big
Yes.
difference in
Yeah,
that
no,
goal.
there's no coaching. There's a lack of coaching overall because the whole point is to get the talent up because but that's a monetization, which is a whole different point. But you made a point of teammates, the those three and other players on the Knicks, but the guy who was supposed to be the star a couple years ago, I'm curious your thoughts on Julius Randle and is because he's gonna have to go 20 and 10 for the Knicks to get anywhere.
But
But
so here's my thing. He is a 20 and 10 guy. He absolutely is a 20 and 10 guy. I think if you look at his career stats
oh
when he's
yeah,
healthy,
I
I
mean
think the go ahead, sorry.
I'm saying when I say 20 and 10, I mean like he's really gonna have to be a dominant second fiddle to Jalen Brunson for the Knicks to go far in the playoffs, says the
Yes.
person who doesn't start paying attention to the NBA until the end of the Super Bowl and then until spring training really kicks off. So I got about
But
a 4 week span where I'm paying attention to the NBA, which is like right now. That's
but
my
you're not
thought on it.
but you're not wrong. And I think, you know, that man has unfairly gotten booed by this impatient MSG fan base. And I understand their impatience. Living here in New York, I get it. The Ewing, when you glamorize the Ewing years where they almost won, it was almost with that team. They almost beat Houston. They almost beat Jordan's Bulls. They almost beat Reggie Miller's Pacers, although that was more back and forth. They almost beat, Alonzo Mourning. It was always almost with this team. When you celebrate almost more than your actual glory years that happened to be in the Nixon years, a team that was stocked with Hall of Famers, like oh shoot, and I'm blanking out. Man, like the Busher,
Oh
what's his
yeah, yeah.
face with the
Walt
you know what I'm
Clyde
talking about?
Frazier and
Yeah,
yes, you're
Walt Clyde Frazier, yes. Like and I'm and
Busher,
I'm I'm
Dave Barry, and
I'm
Bill Bradley.
embarrassing myself. Yes, and Bill Bradley. I'm embarrassing myself not remember those names. Phil Jackson, who came off the bench, but he's more of a coach. But when you glorify the more almost than your actual glory years, that tells you their only titles is in the Nixon administration. That tells you how thirsty this fan base is. So I understand the impatience, but the thing is, for the most part, Julian Randle comes to work. I understand from his haters trying to explain it to me. Well, he plays too much ISO ball. He does just too much this and too much that. And so they were booing 20 and 10 every night.
Yes.
At the end of the playoffs, people were damn near rioting for this man to leave town. And so what the difference is Jalen Brunson.
Oh, this is why I'm laughing because
Randall
there
Randall is
I remember
Randall's a
that.
great Randall is a great number two. What happens with Brunson is now he takes the ball away from having to play ISO with Julius Randall, where now it's like you have a more dynamic playmaker, someone who will get Randall actually more involved. Where the 20 and 10 is more, matters more to the fans because I understand where they're coming from, the issue of ISO ball and all that, and but who's he going to give the ball to 2 years ago? Evan Fournier? Come on. Like, come on. Like, look at the pieces Randall had. And the fact that he was even giving you 20 and 10, the fact that you were even going to the playoffs with this guy. And so I thought, I mean, I got receipts to the fans that didn't boo more than that did. Because I'm gonna shout them out at some point. I just, I think Randall can be that guy with Brunson there. Um, I think he learned a lot from Luca, like just like about how to carry, helping. it's funny. We talked about to your earlier point about like how we underestimate him. Being in Lucas' shadow, I think helped him develop into more of a leader in a lot of ways. Being in that locker room to the point where now it's like being around a winner like Luca, and maybe Luca's not a winner in the NBA, but again, let's not dismiss his European resume that he's been doing since he was like 14. You know, I think being around someone like that, seeing the work that someone like that who has maybe not one at the NBA level, but one at the Euro level, seeing the work that goes into it, you know, I think he brought a lot of that, plus what he learned at Nova. And that rubs off on someone like Drew's on Randall. Like, you know, he's now playing around the winner. Let's not forget this guy played with Kobe Bryant at one point, if I'm not mistaken. Like I think, or maybe I'm missing that. Maybe the that when he was a Laker. Maybe I'm missing when they bumped heads. But either way, like Randall's been around the block, and I think having someone like Brunson elevates his game because it's okay. Maybe again, maybe the Mavericks haven't won a title, but their way of doing things is a better influence on the changing culture of the Knicks. Because the Knicks have been a sorry organization. I don't think I'm being out of pocket saying that the Knicks
No,
have been
you're
a
not.
sorry organ, and that's James Dolan's fault. That's
Yeah.
and very hands on. Now he's being hands off. I think having a guy like Brunson, who's like a natural born leader, again, it helps that these guys have played together and they are of NBA quality. It's not just trying to. This isn't trying to reform Carmelo's Syracuse team where they had Jerry McNamara shooting threes from like half court. You know what I mean? Like we're not trying. These are guys that played together that can play at an NBA level, and they've obviously shown that. And that again, they're used to having that chemistry from 3-4 years working together. I mean, I have Knicks fans. I'm a Nets fan. I have Knicks fans on some like, man, what would it take to pull Mikal Bridges away from y'all? Because he's the other piece of that team.
Yeah, he would
And I
help.
get it. And I do not want to lose. I don't want to lose Mikal Bridges. I certainly don't want to lose him to the Knicks. I'm
All right.
absolutely. It would have to be an offer I can't refuse.
As
Yeah.
as much as we could continue to talk sports, I do want this to be a game show. So
Sure.
I'm gonna try and close this out with a trivia question. The movie One Love is coming out, the biopic about it's gonna basically be a 2-year stretch in the life of Bob Marley. Everybody seems to have heard Marley via legend. I was gonna say the compilation album released on Island Records soon after his death sold an estimated 25 million copies, and that doesn't count the countless bootleg cassettes and burned CDs from the late 20th century in just about either that or the original in just about every apartment up and down Com Ave. Uh, in
Included here.
throughout Towers, all of that. Uh, Another 20th century record of importance is Billboard. And as of Valentine's Day 2024, how many non-consecutive weeks has the Legend album spent on the Billboard 200 album chart? I got this information from an article by Eric Ducker, posted on The Ringer, a great website. So non-consecutive weeks on the Billboard 200 album charts. This isn't a hint, but it currently is 38, and the number of weeks is only second to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, the other album that was in everybody's dorm room up and down Com Ave. So, so basically, how long, how many non-consecutive weeks has Legend spent on the Billboard 200 album chart? Is the
Non
question.
cons Wow.
Non-consecutive. So just it's 38
Total,
now.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's 38 now. So it's been on there. It's still running. So well, if it's 38, I don't think it's going to drop out at 200 just because it's 38 this week. But who
Right.
knows? There's a movie's coming out. It might be. But that's the number. You got to guess. As long as we
Uh
understand the question, I want before I before.
so basically what you're asking me is trivia question is how many weeks non-consecutive just in total has it been in the number one spot
Just on the 200 album
on the
chart.
200 out
Just
chart.
on the 200
I'm gonna
album
go.
chart.
I'm gonna go with and you said it right now. And you
Right
said it
now it's
top.
38. Right now it sits at 38.
So how much is it total It's gonna go up with the movie because it tends. That's how music is consumed nowadays, is through TikTok and movies. I'm gonna go with 55 weeks
55
total.
weeks?
Yes,
That's
55.
your guess? All right.
Yes.
Well, the answer will be in the description for the next episode. So you can hear it then. I'd like to thank Ed for stopping into the terminal and wish you'll find success on your way back. Uh, the same
Thank you, man.
sentiment for I have for any and all listeners. I hope your travels take you safely home. I'm going to return to mine and thank you very much for being on the show and listening. Have a good evening.
Peace.